filmmakers Anthony Bushman for the movie Psychopomp. Probably the most travelled film director we've got at the festival this year. Yeah, why would you travel all this way to come to Romford?
Well, I'm from Los Angeles. It's the international premiere, and I wanted to be here to support the film. And I've never been to the UK, and so
nowhere in the UK. And you chose Romford. Brilliant.
It's been a good time. And I just wanted to come out and support the film, and meet the locals like yourself, and enjoy the festival. Have a it's been a rough year so far. in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about that.
Yeah,
I think that's why, as a festival, we're extremely proud to have you here, of course, and to show your movie. But again, like the things you've got going on, I'll not touch on it too much. But for you to turn up here in person, for us, that's a huge deal. It's massive, and we do thank you so much for turning up.
Well, thank you for having me. And I kind of needed the break and just watch a bunch of horror movies over a few days. So
we'll jump into Psychopomp in a quick second, but
sure.
First of all, let's jump back a little bit further and a little bit about your breaking into this industry, coming into being a filmmaker,
sure.
And why on earth you would do it to yourself.
Well, I mean, if we go back far enough, coming out of high school, I started college as an animal science pre-vet major. Filmmaking was the last thing on my mind. I come from a very blue collar family, and that anything like that in the arts was just not even a consideration. First 2.5 years of college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I realized pretty soon that I didn't want to do the vet thing. But I eventually came to, I always loved stories. I always loved movies and creating my own stories with action figures as a kid, and I did some creative writing and things like that, and it just sort of ended up becoming morphing into this. I took a film class just for fun, really. This is my third year of college, and it was the greatest class I'd ever taken to that point. I was like, we get to watch movies and then and learn about them and dissect them. This is amazing. And so it started to kind of blossom from there. And, I eventually joined this filmmaking club at college and made my first movie, and it was terrible and no one will ever see it. But I got the bug, right? I just had to keep, doing that. And then, I eventually got a film studies degree, and then ended up, getting into graduate film school for production at USC in LA, which is what took me to LA, and continue to learn, continue to make films, and just trying to get better in all of the various ways that you can as a filmmaker, and still getting better, trying to learn as much as I can, and meet other filmmakers, and watching as many films, and listening to podcasts, and reading books, and all the things, right?
And indie filmmaking, it's hard to get a film made, and it's one of those things that I don't think enough credit gets put on a lot of the films that we show at these festivals, because sometimes they get shown at festivals and then that's it, But people poured their absolute heart and soul into these movies, and that's why we try to champion them, and we love what you guys are doing. But what is, you have to wear many different caps. What is your favorite part of filmmaking, and I guess what sort of personality trait do you believe that you have that makes it doable for you?
So one of the really cool things about USC as a film school, and I know other film schools do this as well, you enter, and regardless of what you want to pursue, whether you want to pursue directing, cinematography, editing, sound, whatever you want to pursue, you are forced to do everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of people find that, like, you know, they want to start as a director, but then they realize halfway through the program, you know what, I'm a really good editor, or I love sound design, and, you know, they end up moving in that kind of direction. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I started film school, and that was one of the things that attracted me to a school like USC, that I would, you know, be able to experience all of these different facets of you know, filmmaking. And I sort of discovered that directing was really the thing for me. And I think a lot of that is because I'm able to keep my eye on the vision, right, of the film, the end product. But you know, that you asked what my favorite part is, and it's really the collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration between all of the various department heads, collaboration with my actors, collaboration with, you know, my co-writer, throughout every step of the process. I love working with someone else who is an expert in their craft, and getting their input, getting their ideas that I may never have my own. And sometimes they're brilliant and they'll make their way into the film. And sometimes, you know, I have to, even as great of an idea as it may be, it doesn't quite fit with this particular film or this particular moment in the film. And I feel like I'm pretty good at being able to, you know, kind of keep my eye on the prize and make those decisions, but still being very open and accepting of, you know, that collaboration with others.
So let's jump into Psychopomp, the feature that we're showing at the festival. We've already shown it at the festival. It was yesterday.
Yes.
Yes. So what was that like, seeing it up on the big screen? Obviously, it's the UK premiere.
Right.
You may have heard about everything that's been going on with the cinema. It used to be the Premiere Cinemas, and then it closed down at the tail end of last year. So it meant the Romford Film Festival didn't really have a home anymore. Spencer and the gang, bless them, come together with the Romford Film Trust, and it's going to reopen as the Lumiere. So essentially, this block of movies that we're showing is the start of a brand new era. So for us to have your movie as a premiere in this brand new era starting is amazing.
Yeah.
But how is it for you to see it up there on this big screen and have an audience like that?
You know, I mean, it's very cool. Like, that's what you dream about, right? To have your film play on the big screen. And, you know, especially in this day and age where everything is streaming and, you know, not as many things get theatrical distribution or anything like that. It's a really cool experience, you know, and, you know, the video audio qualities were, you know, fantastic. So, you know, I thank you all for that. And it's been, you know, it's been pretty cool that we've had basically the run of the entire theater. You know, there's nothing else going on right now, you know, until it officially reopens. And so just everyone that you see here is either a filmmaker with the festival or a fan of horror films. And, you know, so, you know, I've met a lot of great people, and, you know, a lot of people have, you know, expressed their, you know, interest in the film. They've, you know, seen the poster, and that's gotten a lot of, you know, interest from folks.
Excellent.
And then, yeah, people, you know, who saw the film, you know, seem to you know, really enjoy it. When it doesn't, you know, provide any sort of, like, you know, traumatic memories from COVID.
Well, I was gonna say, so the answer to this is probably quite obvious, but where did this movie come from? What was the initial idea for you to tell this movie, and why did you want to tell this story?
So, this is my first feature. I've made a bunch of shorts in the past, but first feature. But it was not supposed to be my first feature.
Okay.
We were very late in pre-production on what was supposed to be my first feature. It was a haunted house film that we were scheduled to shoot in March of 2020. And 36 hours before, we had to postpone due to COVID. I was living with my my creative partner, my roommate, my best friend, Brian, and it was rough. Like it was years in the making to get to that point, to finally get the financing for a feature. And it was, not a lot of money. It was, it was still, in the, low budget tier, but it was a, legitimate budget. We were fully cast, fully crewed, had our permits, our production insurance, the whole bit, right? 36 hours away. We had to pull the plug. So, we were, kind of depressed for a while. And after a couple months of the depression and boredom, there's only so much Netflix you can watch.
Exactly.
We, one day we were like, and no one thought that COVID was going to last as long as it did. Right. So we were like, oh, we'll get back to it later this summer. And then as it went on and on and on, we're like, I don't think that's realistic. Mm-hmm. And so eventually we decided, to just start writing a new thing. And that thing became Psychopomp. And we wrote it, well, we were obviously very inspired by what was happening to us at that time, being quarantined and, so isolated from the rest of the world. But, we also wrote it with budget in mind, because it was just out of our own pockets, whatever we could afford. We wrote it with Brian specifically in mind for the lead. I reluctantly agreed early on to appear in the film. Mm-hmm. I am typically very allergic to being in front of the camera. I'm much more comfortable behind it. But we thought it might be important for him to interact in person with another individual. And so, it was with the understanding, I agreed to it with the understanding that my role would remain small. But then as the writing process went on and the script evolved, my role kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I'm in half the damn movie, which was never the intent, but it's, it's fine. I got used to it. I, kind of overcame my demons. But yeah, we wrote it with that in mind. And, we also, there are some actor friends, the four leads that we cast in that haunted house film, I hopped on a Zoom call with them, when we were early in the writing process, and it was just like, hey, we want to do this thing. And I know we're all quarantining, so we want to shoot something with you, but it's just going to be over Zoom. We're like, you will remain isolated, quarantined, and we'll just shoot over Zoom. So we were able to expand the cast that way, but it's, within the story world, it's our main character played by Brian is just communicating with these other people over Zoom. So we just leaned into the technology.
And how did that work, and what kind of challenges does that throw up when you're essentially directing over Zoom? Because I imagine that would be very strange, because you can't be in the room with them. So what kind of challenges does that throw up?
It was a little tough, but then again, the only thing that we're seeing is what we're seeing in the little Zoom box, right? So
that's your cinematography done.
Yeah, but I mean, I had to work with each of the actors, and when you would normally do something like this, like if you were shooting this in a normal situation, but there was still like the video chat kind of situation, you would set up a real camera and a real mic, and you would light it, you would shoot them, and then you would in post downgrade that footage to make it look like video footage, right? Add effects and stuff like that, or make it look like Zoom footage or whatever. But we didn't have that. I couldn't get a camera to them or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So we just leaned into the technology. We would get on a Zoom call, and so that I was there and I could see the performances, and I would mute myself during the take, and then I could unmute myself at the end of the take and get feedback, and then each of them would record themselves in QuickTime. In QuickTime, you can actually do just a screen recording. Yeah. So I would receive a a screen recording from each individual for each take. That way I could cut together a scene. I could pull parts like you would for any normal scene.
Yeah.
I could pull parts of each take and craft it together and, trim out some of the fat in between and, and really edit. And then, so we'd be on the screen for some of it, and then we'd come back out into the real world for Theo, Brian's character, interacting with them, and, kind of back and forth a little bit so that we weren't just like fully living on the computer screen.
Zoom, yeah. Like everyone was at the time as well.
Right, yeah.
But so when we came out of COVID, there was a lot of Zoom movies, like, because people had figured out like we could make movies on our Zoom, on our cameras and all, like, things like that. It was a little bit easier. But was there ever a little bit of trepidation for you that this was just going to be another Zoom movie? And if that was a thought, how did you make yours different so it would stand out?
I wasn't very concerned about the Zoom movie part of it because
it's not all Zoom.
The majority of the film is in the real world. We had the haunted house film that we were shooting. We were renting a camera package with whatever the top of the line red was at that time. I don't remember the model. But we were also borrowing a camera from my friend Zach, who's a executive producer on Psychopomp. We were borrowing a camera for him as our B cam. Yeah. We had already gotten his entire camera package, and it was just sitting in our house when COVID hit. And I called him up and I was like, "Hey, do you want to get your camera back?" And he's like, "Nope, we're quarantining. Like, it's safe at your place. You can just hang on to it." And so when we were thinking about doing this, I called him back up and I was like, "Hey, can we use your camera? It's just sitting here." He's like, "Yeah, go for it."
Yeah.
So we had, professional cameras, a Red Scarlet. We had this professional camera to use. And so the majority of the film is, shot more traditionally, like a movie would be. Yeah. And they're just, these scenes that are over Zoom. The concern that I had as things were going on was a pandemic movie, more so than the Zoom part of it, the pandemic part of it. And, when we started writing it, that wasn't really on our minds. It was just, this is kind of what we were dealing with. And it was, it inspired us. And so we just kind of wrote about that isolation that we were feeling, and we wrote it into the script, and how that isolation can really have detrimental effects on this person who is, alone for the most part, how that can affect him psychologically. But then as we were seeing like more and more, pandemic films coming out and people working on them, I started to realize that was maybe not the best of ideas, because people are kind of sick of pandemic films. I think though that this film, the background of it is the pandemic, but the meat of the story is his inner relationships with other people in his life, and the moral decisions that he has to make at times, which, outside of these extreme circumstances, you'd be like, that's a terrible decision. Why would anyone ever make that? But in these circumstances, you kind of start to understand it.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that we wanted to do, was we wanted to make the audience feel uncomfortable thinking about each individual decision that he makes that sends him down this spiral, right, to this kind of dark place. But getting him to getting the audience to think about it, and at each step, it's like, well, I could definitely see how I would make that decision as well. Yeah. Even though it's crazy to think, but like in these circumstances,
crazy but almost logical.
Yeah. And so and he eventually gets to this dark place, but it's like, would you make a different decision at each turn? Maybe not. Who knows, right?
I mean, that's a good point of any movie. Is like, it leaves you thinking about that kind of thing, and gets you talking, and it keeps you interested, if you know what I mean. Right. You don't want people leaving the movie and not talking about it.
Exactly.
So I get what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything that creatively you guys had to come up with that you thought, this is never going to work, but actually with the creative way that you guys did it, it did?
Yeah. So he and I had this amazing relationship where we were very comfortable with each other, and we could throw out any ideas. It was mostly in the writing stage.
Yeah.
But early in the writing, he was like, you know what we should do? We should come up with a shot where the camera is moving and both of us appear in the shot, because he and I were the only two crew members throughout production. We were the only two actors in person. So there's literally nobody else. So if the camera is moving and we're both in the shot, like, how do we achieve that? Right. And I was like, that's insane, and I love it. Let's figure it out. And so we found a moment that felt right to do this, and we composed this whole shot where he starts off in the shot, and I'm operating camera, and there's a slow push in, and then he leaves frame, and then the camera kind of slowly spins around, and then off camera I hand it off to him, and and he starts another push in going the opposite direction, and I run around the house, and then I appear as my character. And it was insane. There's so much that we had to pull off. And again, it's just the two of us doing everything. And, but it was so much fun. It was the only thing we shot in that day. We probably did 25 takes, and 2 of them maybe were usable. And then, one was by far the best. But it was just the timing, everything else. It had to get it right. But it was challenging, and it was so much fun. And he and I definitely celebrated after we wrapped. But yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
And what would you say? I always ask this question that filmmakers and creatives can tell me, like, what's wrong with the movies. It's a question I always like to ask, because I like to turn that and spin it on a positive, and sort of like, what do you see up on the screen that you are absolutely most proud of? But you kind of already answered that, so I'm going to change it a little bit. And when you have watched it with an audience, or when you've watched it with family, friends, anyone like that, what's been the best reaction that you've had from someone, and what particular moment would it be to that film?
I think one that stands out, which is kind of funny. So there's a character in it, Susan, a pretty major character. We only interact with her over Zoom, or over video chat. But my character, Grant, is having an affair with her. And it's all very subtle, the references early on. Yeah. Most people, though, get it. And then it's about 2/3 of the way through the film when it is stated more explicitly, when she starts to come clean to Theo, her like best friend, basically. And there was a friend of mine who watched it, and she did not pick up on any of the subtleties early on. And then in that moment when it was more explicitly said, she was like, "What? No way!" and it was just kind of hysterical moment that just somehow she didn't pick up on it. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then just kind of in general, like, Brian was not really an actor. I mean, he had acted some, but his main focus was writing, for sure. Yeah. And I'm very proud overall of the performance that I was able to get from him. And we were able to kind of craft together. A lot of people have responded to that as well.
And in terms of your acting, would you do it again, or is that one and done?
Listen, I'm still not interested in acting.
Yeah.
I got used to it because I ended up being in the film so much.
Had to.
that by the end of it, I felt like early on, I felt like my performance was much more stiff. But then as the shoot went on, I got more comfortable in front of the camera. I still didn't really enjoy it. A lot of people have commented that my performance is pretty good. I will say that I will take credit for that as the editor of the film more so than the performer in the film, because there's a lot of crap that's on the cutting room floor. But a lot of friends have said you should at least do the Hitchcock thing and like have a cameo in your films, which maybe I'll consider that, but I don't really have any interest in pursuing acting. No.
And in terms of the Psychopomp and this universe you've now created, this world you've now created, could you see yourself diving back in, not necessarily as a sequel, but maybe like other people's stories around the world? Could you see that?
That's something interesting. I never really considered that, because the first thing that comes to mind if you're talking about like a sequel or something would be the continuation of Theo's story. Yeah. But that's something we can't do because, Brian is sadly no longer with us. But in terms of like looking at other people's stories, that's actually very interesting. I hadn't considered that before this moment. That's something that we could do for sure.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Yeah. No, that's great. But then it comes back to the question of are people sick of pandemic movies?
I think for a short time, especially as well, like being part of the film festival, the first year coming out of the pandemic, like everything was COVID. It was all lockdown. It was all Zoom movies. But I feel like now, a couple of years removed, I know it's still quite prevalent, but a couple of years removed, I'm a lot more open to it. I'm a lot more open to going back. I don't feel like I need to do the therapy courses for it anymore.
For sure.
So I think there's legs to that. Yeah. There's definitely legs to that. However you wanted to approach it, definitely.
Yeah. Well, if anyone has financing, I'm open to it.
And you've mentioned your haunted house movie a couple of times. Yes. Is that still something you guys want to proceed with?
Still want to get back to it. Yeah. It's a script that I'm very fond of. It's a little bit of a different take on the haunted house genre. Mm-hmm. But I want to get back to that. I have a couple other scripts that Brian and I did that are also in the kind of low budget range. One's a time travel film. The other is a supernatural thriller. I love living in the genre space, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, like kind of that whole arena I love to play in. And so, any of those I'm looking for financing for any of those and, trying to get my second feature made at this point.
Everyone's inspired by someone. Filmmakers, creatives, directors, everybody got into this industry for the love of what they saw on the big screen, as you mentioned earlier, and you just movie magic. If you could show Psychopomp to any director or creator that inspired you for a little bit of feedback, who would you show it to?
That's a great question. I feel like this is the obvious answer, but I'd probably have to go with Spielberg. I grew up watching his films. Like, I'm probably, making movies today because of, like, Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Jaws. Jaws was Brian's favorite movie of all time as well. And, the Indiana Jones movies, like, just on and on and on, like so many. He's such a huge influence in who I am as a filmmaker. Yeah. I didn't get to shoot Psychopomp like really the way that I would normally shoot a film because of our severe limitations. Yeah. But one of the things that I've always loved about Spielberg is his like moving masters. And that kind of inspired that shot that I was talking about before, right? And so, probably he's probably the answer. Yeah.
If money was absolutely no option, no obstacle, no option, like you just had untold amounts of it. Yeah. Is there any one dream project that you've got in your head that you would love to bring to life?
Yes.
But you're not going to tell me, are you?
Well, no, there's. Can I give two answers?
Yep.
So I'm working on a script right now with one of my dearest friends in the world, Jules. She and I have been working. It's a sci-fi fantasy film, much bigger budget than anything else that I've written to this point. So not my second feature, but hopefully a little bit down the road, right? That would be one, but that's a single feature. I've also in the last few years gotten into D&D.
Nice.
It is actually where I met Jules. We have a weekly Saturday night game. I will not be attending tonight because I'm here, but normally we play every Saturday night, and it's a fantastic group of friends. And but I found them through this online show called The Dungeon Run. And I found The Dungeon Run. One of the actors that we cast for Gateway, who's also in Psychopomp, Zoe, who plays Theo's sister.
Right, okay.
She is in the cast of The Dungeon Run, and the first season, the campaign one of The Dungeon Run is called The Heroes of Bingle. It's one of my favorite stories of all time.
Right.
And it's it's high fantasy, right? And I would love to make that as a series. That would I would. Yes, I love that story so much. I would love to make that if money were not, yes, 100%.
But with that, what is the second feature going to be? What's next for you? What you working on that you can tell us about? And where can we see you next?
Yeah, the haunted house film, The Gateway House, is probably most likely. Just trying to, either of those other two films that I mentioned before, the time travel film or the supernatural thriller, those are both ready to go as well. So, Gateway is probably they're going to be the second feature. Other than that, we're waiting to hear back from other festivals. This is our third festival that we've played at. And so don't have anything else lined up at the moment, and looking for distribution. So
I was going to say what would be next for Psychopomp as well.
Well, hopefully some sort of distribution, whatever that may be. We're actively looking, and then future screenings on the festival circuit.
Awesome.
To be determined.
So everyone keep your eyes out, 100% keep your eyes out for this movie. I'm going to start wrapping it out now, but do me a favour and let people know where they can find you, where they can find your projects, things like that. Just take a moment to pimp yourself, but first of all, sorry, not pimp yourself, promote yourself.
That's fine, we'll do either.
But first of all, thank you so much for submitting Psychopomp to us and letting us show up on the screen, and thank you for making the journey to be here, because it's incredible to see you here. It's absolutely brilliant. LA's a long, long way away, especially with everything you've got going on right now as well. So thanks for that. But
very simple. I'm basically Anthony Bushman everywhere. So AnthonyBushman.com, Anthony.Bushman, I think it is, on Instagram. Anthony Bushman on Blue Sky. Not really doing the Twitter thing much anymore. But so yeah, I've made my way over to Blue Sky. Those are kind of probably the best ways to follow me, and I'm posting about Psychopomp and stuff on all of those places. Thank you. No. Thank you. Spencer and the entire festival team. It's been a lot of fun coming here and getting to meet a lot of cool people and show the film to your audience.
Well, we loved having you here, and it's great having you here. And you actually said something before that never actually occurred to me. This is the first year, because obviously with the premiere shutting down, like the festivals in the past, it has been a case of you get a mixture of filmmakers, but you also get the patrons coming, because we don't always have every screen.
Sure.
And that never actually occurred to me until you said that. Yeah. And I'm kind of no, everyone here is actually a filmmaker, and that's a wild experience. Mm-hmm. And now that you've said that, I'm kind of damn, that's pretty awesome.
It is.
So even just referencing that, thanks for pointing that out to me. But again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.